Hello, and welcome to our second healing conversation. I'm Rachel Singleton, and I'm here with
Ian Watson.
And today we're continuing with this idea of exploring what healing is and how we can facilitate that, both in terms of if you're someone who's a practitioner who's working with people, or if you're someone who's a client on a healing journey. And often we're both at the same time. Today we want to look at the idea of personal authority, about taking responsibility for our own healing. And there's lots of facets to this. We've just been putting our heads together on this before coming on air, and there's a lot to go at here. So part of this is a sense of our personal authority as opposed to an external authority. So when we go to the doctors or somebody like that, then that can be seen as an external authority. And for a lot of people who are brought up with the NHS, sometimes that is the only authority. And they let somebody else tell them how to look after their body, what to put in their body, what to do with their body in order for their body to function. And sometimes the sense of their own personal authority and responsibility and empowerment around their own body and their own being, their emotional well-being, their mental well-being can be lost a little in that relationship. So we want to explore some of that, and we also want to explore how we can give ourselves permission to look after ourselves.
Yeah, it's a big topic. But I think it's a topic that anyone who's involved in any kind of helping profession or healing work over time, you'll run up against this topic in some way, shape or form, as you and I both did. And one of the things that I can remember first, I was genuinely surprised by the way that people would expect me to tell them what to do and to make decisions on their behalf without them really seeming to want to even consider the implications of those decisions. I can remember feeling like that's not what my role is. It didn't feel right to me. So I was already interested in it from that side of the coin. But I also started to see that as I worked with people over time, often their relationship to that would start to change kind of magically by itself. So, for example, people who'd come in initially who'd been seemingly quite passive, and looked as though they wanted me to be the expert and to make the decisions on their behalf. At a certain point, that could change, and the person would want to be involved. And they'd want to, why are you giving me this exactly? And what is this? What is it made from? And And I can remember having these conversations with some of my peers. And at that time, I was working in the homeopathic field. And it was not uncommon amongst homeopaths, I don't know how it is these days, to be somewhat secretive about what they were giving to their clients. And feeling that was beneficial. Because if the person's going to go away and look up the name of the remedy and they find it's made out of some strange substance that they don't know or understand it, they're just going to get confused and maybe fearful from that. So it's something that maybe we should protect them from. And again, that didn't sit comfortably with me. I felt like, no, there's something in me that said, well, the journey of healing includes taking responsibility for your own decisions. And if that means getting informed, then you need to get informed first before you can take responsibility. And I would always encourage people to know what it was that they were taking or signing up for, and to get to a place where they were comfortable with it. And if they weren't, that was okay. They could tell me.
yeah exactly.
I couldn't see any downsides to having people be more involved in the treatment, but I realized that wasn't necessarily commonplace at that time. So it was a kind of a learning curve for me.
Because you do see that you'll go to someone who they'll be an expert in their field, and they have that kind of sense of, I have got the information and I will tell you what to do, and that can be quite intimidating for people to come up against as well. So to go to someone who's saying, no, you've got the answers, I can give you information, you can find out about this, you can see if this feels right for you, is quite extraordinary for some people to experience, isn't it? They may never have actually come across that in relation to their health before. That's
true. And and it can take some getting used to at first. So, as practitioners, we have to allow for that there's a learning curve for the client as well. And it's not helpful to push people to be at a point where they're not ready to be. So that's the other side of it. There might be a degree of hand-holding that we need to do, and gentle introduction of ideas and so forth. Because too much information too soon is unhelpful as well. People can easily feel overwhelmed, and they get distressed because there's just too many options, and they get anxious and fearful, and that's not helpful. So there's the information piece, but there's also the as you said, the person coming to their own kind of felt sense of what's right for them. And that learning that's the more invisible piece in a way. It's a bit more subtle, and yet it actually turns out to be more crucial. Right? That's what I found. Absolutely. And there's something about when the penny starts to drop for someone, when they start to get their sense of that internal voice saying, no, that's not right, and yes, this feels right, this resonates, this sits right with me, that as they get that felt sense, then their confidence in it grows, and their confidence in their own choices and their own voice grows. Because to be launched in at the deep end right from the start, where they've got to make all the decisions about their health, well, no, they have come for guidance, they have come for help with that, and part of that is listening for their inner voice, regaining the trust in their own instincts, their own intuition, their own sense of what's going to work, what's good medicine for them as well, and learning to recognize that in their life. And I came to see that this was really crucial factor, because I can think of times when I've worked with people who are undergoing treatment for cancer, for example. And as part of that, they also wanted to come to me for support, in a kind of with alternative healing modalities, but it was alongside or in addition to other things that they were doing. And I started to see that it was really, particularly in those situations where someone is maybe facing a life-threatening, potentially life-threatening diagnosis, it's really, really important that they start to learn how to fall back on their own wisdom. And not just in regard to whatever it was that I was offering, but in regard to all the treatment, all the suggestions, because people are often bombarded when they get diagnosed with something out of the blue. Everybody's got good ideas. The friends have got ideas, the family have got ideas, and then there's the medical profession has also really just got its own ideas. They're not necessarily the right ones for that individual. They may or may not be, but people often feel under huge amounts of pressure to either to conform or to go along with what someone who looks like they know better than I do is suggesting, and yet it may or may not be right for them at that point in time. And what I saw was that the people who really gave themselves they learned how to give themselves that space to listen in, tended to navigate that journey much more effectively. Absolutely. And there's a kind of respect there, isn't there? It's according yourself respect. It's saying, actually, there may be an expert there may be a loved one there may be a whoever telling me that this is what I should do, but this is my body and it is my journey, and actually at the end of the day I do need to make that decision myself, and I have to go with what really feels right for me. And there's something magic happens when a person does that. When any of us do that, it's almost like there's a whole energy that gets behind that decision. That's what I saw. And even, as an alternative practitioner, I might look at a person's treatment choices and think, well, I wouldn't be doing that.
Mm.
But I really learned to respect that if it came from that place within them,
Yeah.
it's of no relevance what I would be doing.
Yes.
Right? It has no bearing on it.
Yeah.
My role as a practitioner is not to say, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be looking at what I'm offering. My role was to say, absolutely do that. Do that
That accords. Yeah.
Yeah, it resonates with you.
It's that moment when someone slips into alignment with themselves and everything kind of just comes together. There's a cohesion to it, isn't there? You can feel it in them and they can really feel it as well. And it, like you say, it's got real strength, real power. And it doesn't matter what it looks like as action in the outer world.
No.
It's where it's coming from inside and what it feels like and how it pulls them together and gives them that kind of strength and momentum.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing that in the medical field, there's a big problem called non-compliance, which is, even the term doesn't sit right with me, but anyone who works in the medical field will know what I'm talking about. And essentially, it's perceived to be a big problem that GPs and other practitioners will spend time diagnosing people, advising them on a course of treatment, prescribing that treatment, only to have the patient not take it, or not take it for very long, or take it in a kind of hit and miss way, and then to come back to the practitioner and say, I'm not better. You know, the practitioners sometimes feel almost kind of justified in, well, of course you're not better, you didn't take the treatment.
Yeah.
And yet I think what's often been missed there is that treatment didn't really sit right for the client. And when we say yes to something verbally, or because we feel like we have to, or we feel pressured, but energetically we haven't really signed up for it, we're not going to do it. And that's what I started to learn about this, was that, well, of course people don't comply. None of us comply with things that we're not really signed up for. We find creative ways to to subvert the very thing that we say we're going to do. We find ways not to do it. We lose the medicine. We forget to take it. All kinds of stuff happen. The dog eats it.
Oh, something I've seen as well is that, particularly in older people who've come right through with the NHS for most of their lives, that they'll absolutely obediently do it, but at some level it doesn't do anything. Right. It's like it doesn't seem to kick in, because obedience isn't the same as agreement. It isn't the same as that whole self saying, yes, this is what feels right for me. It's like, I've been told to do this. I've always been good. I'm going to do what I'm meant to do and what I'm told to do, and I'm going to do it 100%. And yet that isn't enough, because we're more than that.
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it, that I started to see that the clients who were often, they'd been labeled as the difficult patient, I started to see those were the ones I really wanted to work with. Yeah. That was actually more interesting to work with in some respect, because they were already onto this in their own way. They were onto it. And they'd started to notice maybe their own resistance to just being told what to do. Yeah. And their own resistance to taking treatments that they didn't really believe in. And they were looking for a different way of working, to have a different kind of relationship with a healthcare practitioner. And sometimes that's the point where people move from the orthodox to the more complementary alternative field. It's not necessarily that they're looking for a different kind of treatment. They're looking for a different way of being treated. Yeah,
that's an important distinction. Yeah. And in fairness, in either field, you can get a person who's saying, I've done this assessment of your body, and this is what you have to do. This is what you have to eat. This is what you have, the supplements you have to take. This is the exercises you have to do. And yet that, again, is imposing, unless there's a full sense of engagement and agreement there. Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it?
It is. It is. And I mean, the simpler way that I've come to see it now is that what really brings about change for any of us is when we see something for ourselves has value.
Yeah.
We have to see it for ourselves. And until that point, you can throw as much information at a person as you like. It won't make any difference until they see the value of it for themselves. You know, if information alone did it, nobody would smoke.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Nobody would eat too much sugar or fat or any of these things that are supposed to be bad for it, because we all know the information. There's no shortage of information. But clearly that doesn't, on its own, it's not enough to change behavior, even in areas of our life where we want to make a change. I'd like maybe especially in those areas. There's something that we have to come to realize for ourselves as a kind of an insight or an aha or a recognition. Or just an inner knowing of some kind.
Yeah.
And then there's a process of alignment that happens where our decisions then line up with what we've come to understand.
Yeah.
And it becomes easier to decide, because people often struggle with health decisions, especially when they're fearful of the outcome, you know, what they might have been diagnosed with. And it's nice to see that when people start to get more in touch with that inner more instinctual knowing that we all have, decision making gets easier. It tends to be just obvious
it happens by itself, doesn't it? Yeah, because there's that sense of sitting back within yourself and not being up there in your head, hearing all those voices, all those people are telling you to do, all those voices in yourself, I should, I have to, I must. But there's that kind of settling down beneath that and coming into that quiet knowing inside and just letting that unfold, letting that reveal itself. And there's a real trust involved in that, which is very beautiful when you see someone start to gain that trust in themselves, in life, that they know that the answers will come, that they know that the big decisions will make themselves. That that's actually part of healing.
Yeah, it is healing in and of itself.
Healing,
yeah, absolutely right. And I think that's why it's so easily overlooked, because we get so focused on the external form of healing. You know, what am I going to take? What am I going to do? What am I going to eat?
What do I do? That's
visible. That's much more tangible and in some sense measurable. But actually the decisive aspect is not that. It's something that's more subtle. I remember listening to a talk by R.D. Laing years and years and years ago. He was a kind of anti-psychiatrist who, you know, he saw through a lot of the things that were done in his profession that to him were not healing. And I remember something that he said, it just really struck me at the time. He said, the treatment is how you treat someone.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was so pertinent to me. That's it. It's how do you conduct yourself? What kind of relationship? How much trust is there in that relationship? How much support for the autonomy of the person? How much are we undermining that? Are we creating relationship of dependency on me as an expert? He was very sensitive to all of that, and I really learned a lot from what he shared around that.
Yeah, because when somebody comes to us who is assuming that we'll take authority, and we're there as a practitioner, and they're saying, you know, if you can just tell me what to do, or you know, just tell me what I need to take, you know, whatever I need to do, then there's that moment where we could take that power. You know, we're being offered that, someone's power, and recognizing that and saying, well, let's look at the options, and then you can see which one of these feels right for you. You can see what sits properly with you, and constantly passing that back and reflecting that back until the person gets used to the fact that they're making the decision, not you. You can give them information. You know, we can go to an expert to benefit from their expertise, but we don't have to go to an expert and have them have authority over us and tell us what to do. It's that sense that this is a two-way street. You've got the inner expertise. I often think of it as being like a house. Like, I'm inside this house and I know every aspect of that inside being in me. but I can't see me from the outside. And somebody might come along and walk down the road and see my house and see that there's a great big tree overshadowing it, or see that something's undermining the structure of the foundations of the house. And then they can come and help me fix that. And I wouldn't know to do that because I haven't got that sight. So it's like this two-way conversation. There's the incredible expertise you have of being that person in that body for all those years and knowing yourself as you do. And then there's the incredible expertise of the person who's coming from the outside, hopefully with all their knowledge. And together they make a really potent package, something that's really, really helpful.
Yeah, I like that. It's a nice way of looking at it, and that recognizing the value of that different perspective is, that's the healthy part of, as you say, consulting with someone who simply they have a way of seeing that is not available to you at that moment. But I think there's also there's the third facet to me. There's okay, let's say I'm the client. There's my perspective, what I can see, what I am aware of. There's the practitioner. There's what they can see and what they're aware of. But there's also a third ingredient, which is what's yet to be revealed. And very, very often that's a crucial part of the healing journey too. It's something that is unknown to either of us.
Yeah.
It's something that is ready to unfold and be made visible through a journey. It's not necessarily all in one go. It's something that you've got to feel your way into it. And gradually over time, something starts to emerge. It might be involving a whole change in life direction, or just a different way of being in the world. That's not that's not something that either myself or my practitioner would necessarily know what shape that's going to take yet.
Yeah, exactly. And so to allow that, there's this kind of, we talked about this in the last conversation, there's this sense of embracing the unknown, the sense of providing an openness, a spaciousness for what needs to be to reveal itself. So often when people kind of come wanting to know what they can do to get better, maybe it's more accurate to say, well, how can you be with this? How can you be in yourself so that you can move with this process, which is going to take you to another shore. It is going to take you deeper into yourself. It is going to change you. How can we settle into that and allow that in the most easeful way, the most trusting way, and the way that's most fulfilling for us on this, what may potentially feel like a difficult journey, a challenging journey.
Yeah, that's it. And it does require that, as you say, willingness to sit in the unknown. Together, both client and practitioner.
And there's something really potent happens when you can sit there with your practitioner or with your client, when you can sit there and just really be with that. Then it's as if it's this cauldron that just gets the juices going, it gets the ideas coming through, it gets the insights coming through, because there's such openness, there's such curiosity, there's such awareness and presence there. And it's like it focuses the energy so that things can come into the open in a good therapeutic space.
Yeah. And there are other things that, I mean, probably practical things that, again, any practitioner of any experience just learns through experience, that we also have to put in place, which I think you've also come to see quite clearly, things around boundaries and time, how we negotiate time and availability and all of these things. Do you want to say something about that? Because I think I think you've really come to see something about this which is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work with mentoring practitioners, as you do as well as working with clients. And something that I see coming up time and time again is this sense of when someone first comes in, then there's often a few areas in which it's like they're not giving themselves permission. They're not giving themselves a degree of authority, of responsibility, that once they get this, things change for them. They get a lot more sure-footed, either as a practitioner or as a client. And so I would say, like, 3 areas that immediately come to mind is, one, that person can give themselves permission to have boundaries in their life, to have times when they don't work, when they're not available, to have things that they won't do in their work, or that they, there's all these different ways that they might want to be paid, and ways that they might accept a cancellation if they're a practitioner. On there's so many areas in which boundaries come up in our life. And when someone doesn't feel very confident about either saying they've got a boundary, or if they've said it, about maintaining it, about keeping it in place, then life can feel a lot more difficult for themselves. So learning to give yourself permission to have boundaries and keep boundaries is a huge one. Having permission to speak the truth, which really ties in with boundaries, but it's more subtle than that as well. It's more nuanced. That you can say what you feel. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to say when something isn't right for you. You're allowed to express your opinion. And yeah, you don't have to go out there being outrageous and defensive and hostile about that. You can actually do that in a very mature way, in a very relaxed way, and be saying something that's quite different to what somebody else wants to hear or what they believe, and learning that you're allowed to do that, and learning that doesn't have to be a massive drama, is again really empowering for people. And I think the third area is having permission to care for yourself, to take time to exercise, to rest, to meditate, to eat well, to have time in nature doing nothing. These are things that people, again, seem to think that they're not allowed. And, if we're not allowed boundaries, and if we're not allowed to speak our truth, and if we're not allowed to look after ourselves, if we've constantly got to be at the beck and call of everybody else, then it's like everybody else has got authority over us, and we haven't got that personal authority. We're not asserting it. And you see that a lot in the caring professions, that people think that they have to care 100% of the time in 100% of the ways, and they're not allowed to therefore think about themselves, because to do so is selfish. And that's a very, very dangerous, I want to say, road to go down, because you can't keep going if you're doing that. It's
a recipe for burnout.
It's a recipe for burnout. It's a recipe for anxiety and unhappiness and frustration. And also, you're not modeling, if you're a practitioner, you're not modeling the very things that you want your clients to be doing and being in order for them to find their health again. So we've got a duty, in a way, to reside in a comfortable, strong place within ourselves, to find that and to come from that place, because that's what facilitates well-being. It's what holds it up.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such a crucial piece, that the fact that we are, but just by virtue of the work that we do, we're modeling something all the time.
Yeah.
And there's just a degree to which we model, is it a healthy model or not?
Sometimes that's the thing that really clicks, especially for a practitioner, when I'm working with people in supervision, and they get that this isn't just about themselves. It isn't like I've got to speak up for myself. It's like I've got to speak up for myself and have these boundaries because it's good for my clients.
Yeah.
Because they need to experience a healthy model of that themselves in their life, because they might not have ever done that, and they may themselves find it really hard. And somehow when we see that that's something we need to do for other people, it becomes easier to do it for ourselves.
That makes it okay.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? We almost have to trick ourselves into letting that in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's not about me. Okay.
Yeah. Well, in that case, then it isn't selfish. I can actually do that. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that that sense of, it's about giving yourself permission, but it's also about trusting yourself. It's about knowing that you're trustworthy, that yes, when you need to say something, it's because you need to say something. It's because you're feeling that there's a disconnect here, or that there's a discord, and you need to come in with what your insight is to start to resolve that and bring harmony there. That when someone is pushing at your boundaries and you keep stepping back and letting that come in and come in and come in, then that person doesn't get that robust feedback that tells them, no, that's not okay. They don't learn from that, because you're not standing in your truth and saying, actually, this isn't all right with me. You're just conceding, you're capitulating each time. And so they keep thinking that's okay. And they don't get that strong boundary around what balance is and what a reciprocal relationship is, which is so important in a healing relationship.
It is, and it's reminding me of anyone who's either been a parent or has worked with young children or spent time around youngsters will know how important this is in that context, because very often children are perceived to be running riot, or taking over the house and whatever, and it's maybe invisible to the adults at that point in time that it's up to them. It's up to them to be putting clear boundaries in place, and that's actually helpful for the child. Because often there's a feeling of guilt, as a parent or as a caretaker, like you're restricting their freedom or something of that kind. But actually, no, there is a freedom in knowing where the boundaries are.
Absolutely. It gives a real sense of safety. It's like when someone knows that you're rock solid on those, but in a kind way, you're kind to yourself and you're kind to them, but those boundaries are there, then that person knows that they're in a space that is contained and that is set up in a safe way. They know that they can feel the edges, but they can feel the space in the middle that those edges give you.
Yeah. And then you can relax into that space.
You can. It's trustworthy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you're saying about children, because I'm sure you're seeing this as well. But one of the things that I'm finding is the other way around, that a lot of people have now got aging parents who are needing their time, their attention, their care. And so I'm seeing a lot of people who are struggling to maintain their boundaries around their parents, and they're finding that really pushes their buttons around, well, what's compassionate and what's selfish, and am I allowed to say no to someone who's looked after me all my life and who now needs me? And all of these areas where we're kind of navigating the sensitivity of sometimes quite subtle boundaries, but really important ones. Again, that knowing that yes, you have to have your space to recharge. You have to have time when you're not on duty, because otherwise you're no good for them anyway. And you're no good for the rest of your family.
It's life is full of rich opportunities for learning this.
Yeah, isn't it just? Endless opportunities.
And it seems to me that if we don't heed the message in one area of life, it's just going to show up in another. Sometimes all at once, And at a certain point, we kind of wake up to the fact, there's something that I need to pay attention to here.
I find it really useful to sometimes think about my options. It's like all the different ways I could respond. So if someone has challenged a boundary and I'm finding it difficult to work out how I'm going to put that boundary back, or how I'm going to call them on that, or let them see that that's happened, that you can get that part of you that just gets really anxious and angsty and just wants to be highly reactive and highly defensive, and can be then offensive, and we can go over the top. And certainly when I was younger, that was something I really, really had to work with. And so one of the things that I like to do, and I often recommend this to clients, is to think about what would be like the absolute worst response that I could give, which there's some part of me wanting to do the really ranty response, and what would be the best, and what would be the kind of things in between. It's like, if I could think of 10 different ways that I could respond to this, what would they be? And somehow that really frees me up to explore, well, just to see that there's so many possibilities, and to just explore, well, what feels right for me now. And it's going to be somewhere in the middle there. There's going to be something that's nicely balanced. It does say what you need to say when you sometimes have to say something that's a bit difficult, but it's doing it in a respectful way. So you're taking into consideration your own feelings, but you're also being kind and gentle with the other person as well. You're being gentle with both of you. And that can be really helpful, just to think about, what are the options here? How do I consider this boundary and consider my words here? Yeah,
it's always just a great place to be able to start from, isn't it? The recognition that there's always multiple choices available, multiple possibilities. Some of them I can see, some of them I can't right now. But at least it's just the fact of knowing that there's more available than I can currently see.
It gives you a spaciousness, doesn't it?
Really helpful.
Yeah. So for anyone who heard, I don't know whether you can hear my cat meowing in the background. He was just he was just trying to unplug my computer there.
Maybe he's telling us it's time's up.
Maybe. Yeah, well, I think we've explored some good things there, and there's much more to come on that subject. I'm sure we'll circle back on that one.
Yeah, and we're going to have further conversations. We don't know how many. This is an ongoing conversation for us, isn't it? But we've already highlighted other topics that we're both interested in and keen to share. So we'll have another episode following up quite soon, hopefully.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody, for listening today.
Thank you, and thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Ian.